Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. Let's rant with Scrapper. And we are with our Mutation Stalker Psyop, who's level 3. We're not going to worry that much about what's going on directly in the game. You can watch for yourself as I play this Psionic Stalker. Because this isn't a Let's Play, this is a Let's Rant, and we're going to be talking about other things as we play the game. And if you want to know why am I doing that instead of just, like talking to the camera, well, I think this is going to be more interesting than just looking at my ugly mug. And um, hopefully it'll be entertaining to people who like watching City of Heroes. And so we're going to be talking about different subjects. And I did an intro in the last video where we were in the tutorial and doing the level 1 and 2 content. Now we're level 3. We're talking to the detective here. And as we go, we're going to talk about something that's not exactly a rant. And give me a sec as I pull it up here. So it's not exactly a rant, but it's pretty much just going to be some advice, role-playing game advice. This was asked in the context of Dungeons and Dragons on a Discord I'm on. It's a Discord for a different game, for Call of Cthulhu actually, and somebody asked in their D&D like general gameplay forum that they have, sort of off-topic forum. It's a new player, and he said, I'm a new player to D&D. I'm just starting out. He said, what advice can you guys give me as a new player for like creating a new character? Like what are the do's and don'ts? So what I'm going to be talking about today are not just for Dungeons and Dragons, but for any role-playing game. What are the do's and don'ts of creating a new character for a role-playing game that you're going to play in? And this isn't really with regard to MMOs and stuff, because they're a little different. But we're talking about tabletop role-playing games. You're going to play D&D, you're going to play Champions, you're going to play Savage Worlds, you're going to play Call of Cthulhu. You're going to play just about anything that's a tabletop game. Pathfinder, Lion and Dragon. You're going to play one of these games with your friends, or maybe with some new people that you're not really quite yet friends with. And what are the do's and don'ts of character creation, of making up your character and using it in this game? So I have 5 of them that I've come up with. I'm sure there are others, but these are mostly system agnostic. Although I'm going to be referencing D&D, I'll probably also try to reference some Savage Worlds and Champions and maybe Rolemaster concepts. Rolemaster probably works a lot like D&D in most of these regards, because D&D, Rolemaster, Lion and Dragon, and many of these other games, the OSR games, Basic Expert Set, and so forth, these are level and class and race-based games. And so you pick a species or race, you pick a class, you start at level 1, and then you level up. And so that's a little bit different from something like Champions or Savage Worlds, where your choices are open-ended. City of Heroes is a level and archetype or class-based game. So some of the advice would fit for here too, but this City of Heroes is an online game, and you just play however the game lets you play. It's different when you're playing with a group of people, because there could be all kinds of options, all kinds of different ways that a DM could design the game, and that other players could want to play it. And you really need to make sure that you're staying within the parameters of what the group has decided to do and what the GM has decided to do with his world. So let me give you the first don't. And my first don't is, don't design all of your characters' game mechanical stats, choosing race, class, subclass, powers in Champions, edges, and attributes in Savage Worlds, as well as skills. Don't do all of that in advance, in isolation, ahead of time, without even like knowing who the DM is going to be and talking with the DM. I see lots of people doing this, particularly in D&D, on D&D Beyond, right? Because D&D Beyond started as, and is still primarily, a character creation tool, right? You can make up a character sheet and put all kinds of stuff on your character sheet, and you can, like, it will let you put anything that you own, anything you have ownership of, it will let you put anything onto your character sheet, quite without regard to whether a particular DM might allow that or not, right? So, for example, you could put stuff from Strixhaven, which is a specific setting, onto your character sheet that a game master who's playing in Dark Sun might not want you to have there. But if you didn't find out ahead of time that you're playing in Dark Sun, you wouldn't know this, right? So what a lot of people do is they go to D&D Beyond, they create a character with all of the stats and mechanics that they want, and then they say, now I'm going to look for a campaign to play the character in. Well, that's going to be very difficult for you to do. It's going to be hard to find a campaign that's a match for your character unless you have made very generic and non-remarkable choices. Like you went into the player's handbook, you picked whatever the most basic fighter or cleric class is and subclass, and you just went with stuff completely in the player's handbook. That would be not remarkable. Or Savage Worlds Core, right? You went to Suede Core, you just took the edges and stuff from Suede Core. So all of that stuff should be compatible with the other settings like Deadlands and Pathfinder and Holler and the Last Parsec and ETU and all that other stuff, right? It's not entirely, but it's pretty close. And most of what you have shouldn't be too objectionable or surprising. We've leveled up to the players or the DM. But even there, you still might be picking stuff that's not appropriate. For example, Savage Worlds, they have arcane backgrounds that can give you access to powers, superpowers essentially, which would be spells or psionics or whatever the arcane background is, weird science. But they're very clear that powers are an optional part of the game. And the game master might want to run some sort of a pulp game that doesn't include supernatural powers. He might want you to be, Cthulhu-esque investigators. They just put out word today that, I guess in conjunction with the the horror companion, which they're getting ready to put out an alpha of soon for Savage Worlds, they're going to be including Cthulhu stuff for Savage Worlds, like Call of Cthulhu translations into Savage Worlds, so that you can play Cthulhu with Savage Worlds mechanics, which I absolutely would love to try because I love Savage Worlds. And I like the thematic material of Call of Cthulhu, right? Well, it doesn't fit that theme, that genre, that setting for the player characters to have power, because it's cosmic horror and they're supposed to be puny in comparison to the big, powerful, scary things that they're fighting. If your character can just throw energy blasts out of its hands, then a Shoggoth or even Yogg-Sothoth might be not be that scary. So the reason I say don't just build your character in isolation like this, build the mechanics of your character with what's in the rulebook, is you don't know which optional rules the DM or GM is going to want to use. You don't know what the other players are going to do. And so in isolation like this, you could make up a character that's incompatible with the setting or with the rest of your party. And so instead of that, which is a don't, my recommendation for the do here is do talk to your DM. Talk to your DM about what his house rules are or her house rules. What are the character creation options that you're choosing? For example, in Dungeons and Dragons, there are 3 ways to create stats for your character. What do they call them? Ability scores, right? You can roll for them, 3d6, 4d6, drop the lowest, etc. You can pick from an array, a stat array, like a matrix of scores, or you can assign them using point buy. And all of those are valid, and not every game master is going to allow every option. For instance, the game master who's going to, now that my D&D game is winding down, one of the other players is taking over, and he said you can either use the array or roll your stats, but no point buy. Okay? So if I then did point buy before talking to him, I would have an inappropriate character and I would have to change it, right? He also said everybody gets a free feat at level 1. Well, if I didn't know that, I wouldn't make a feat for my character, you see? So people have their own house rules as game masters, And some game groups play it one way, and some game groups play it another way. And if you make your character in isolation, and you build the entire character sheet in isolation, you won't have the knowledge of what you can and can't do um, in terms of the house rules and the character creation rules. And so you're going to build your character incorrectly. It's going to be incompatible. You're going to have to do it over again, right? Now, I mean, making up characters is fun. Maybe you don't mind doing it over again. But it's a good idea to talk to the game master and get information about the campaign before you create a character. As another example, once the short campaign that the one player is about to do, which is set like in the Critical Role world, once that is over, and seeing the superhero base entrance makes you remember I got to invite this character into the super group. Um, he's doing this temporary campaign in the Critical Role world. We're doing 4 sessions, excuse me, or so. And then after that, after we do that, my best friend is taking over. And I don't know what his world is going to be like. So I started toying around with some ideas. I came up with a few. A couple of monks, a rogue, a barbarian. I can't remember what else. I think, isn't there a... I think there's a badge right there. Yeah, we go. So I made up a bunch of different characters. One of them was a barbarian, and surprisingly enough to me, because I'm not normally a huge fan of barbarians, the concept I came up with, because it was actually based on a friend of mine from graduate school, the concept I came up with for the barbarian I actually kind of liked the best, and that's the one that sort of fell out of my concepts. Now I didn't make up any stats for him. I was just coming up with what class would he be, what race, and what personality would I give him, how would I act, would I give him an accent, what kind of voice would I use to talk. This one was going to have, the Russian accent and something like that, right? So I got enamored of just the idea of this barbarian, and I thought he was going to maybe be a little humorous, and it would be fun to play, and he would just be sort of this big bear. But I didn't know anything about my friend's campaign, and I didn't know if it would be appropriate. So at one point, my best friend said to me, So have you thought about any character ideas? What are you thinking? Now, he's the one who asked me for character ideas when he hasn't told me what his campaign is about yet. And so I said, well, the thing that has come up to the top now is, wait a minute. Let's see. This is a click power. That's a heal, right? Yeah, we like that. I said, so this will heal us up. I like the idea of this barbarian that I came up with. I just got a bunch of ideas, and the one that's come to the top is a barbarian. And he wrote back and said, I don't think a barbarian will be appropriate in this campaign. Okay? So imagine that stopped me, and I was like, okay, then I just won't work on him anymore, right? I won't think about him anymore. I won't come up with any more ideas besides the short 100-word background I had sort of sketchily written as just an idea. It is basically this guy who was in a tribe, and barbarian tribe, a horde, whatever, and I think his uncle had gone out adventuring and come back with like a beautiful woman from the civilized world and a bunch of treasure, and he was like, I want that. I want a hot girl and a lot of loot. And I want to go out and get even more loot and an even hotter girl, like kind of a rival, right? And that was his motivation. And that's kind of all I had gone. That's as far as I'd gone with this idea. And then a little bit of personality. So it was no skin off my nose to say, all right, well, I'll just stop thinking about him. And I'll go back to thinking about the monks, right? But imagine if I had like spent all this time working on a stat array and where I was going to put his attributes and which subclass I was going to be and all of that. It could be very frustrating to me to be like, but I wanted to play the barbarian, right? And now he feels bad. So, okay, well, even though it doesn't fit in your world, you can go ahead and play the barbarian. Well, now we have an inappropriate character in the world, a character that doesn't fit. And that's going to make everything harder. And it's not just going to make everything harder for one session. It's going to make everything harder forever. for the rest of the campaign because we have a character that fits this campaign like a square peg in a round hole. Okay? So don't make up the class, the race, the superpowers. Think champions. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make up this guy with 75-point multi-power, and you find out the GM has a 60-point max limit in his campaign. I'm going to make up a guy who's from another universe and has extra dimensional teleport, extra dimensional movement. You find out the GM banned extra dimensional movement. Right? I'm going to make up a guy who's vulnerable to gravity attacks because I think they're rare and so it won't hurt me too much. And you find out all the enemies have gravity attacks in this world. You see? So it's really important to talk to the GM about your ideas and to make sure that your ideas, your concept, and especially your stats, your game mechanics, fit with what the GM is planning to do. Talk first. Don't make up the concept first and then say, can I use it? Instead, say to the GM, what's your world like? What kind of concepts would fit? How is this character supposed to operate in your world? Is this going to be like a Goody Two Shoes campaign where we're all true blue heroes? Is this going to be like a bunch of dark crusaders? Are we going to be the villains? Like, you need to find out all that stuff out before you make up your character. Do not make up your character and then try to bring it to the campaign. Go to the campaign and say, what is here that I can use to design my character? So that's the first do and don't. The second don't is related to this, because I've just been talking about your GM. But I would also say don't make up especially a personality, a background, a set of motivations and goals for your character without talking to the rest of the players. Don't keep it a secret. Don't do it in isolation. I know it looks on the TV shows, on the Let's Plays, sometimes like the players don't know who each other's characters are going to be before they start to play. I'm giving advice to new players. Those guys are experienced players. They know each other. They know the table. They know the game. They know how everybody in their group likes to play the game. You don't know that yet if you're a new player. You've just joined this group. Or maybe your whole group has just started to play D&D together. And you don't know what each other is going to like. And so you need to talk to each other. You don't want to make up a character who's going to kill every NPC he meets and find out the rest of the party wants to be a bunch of goody two-shoes superheroes, Superman types. Because that killer character won't fit in, and you're going to cause a lot of frustration, and the group is there's gonna be a lot of friction, right? Now, you might say, hey, on some of these streams, they play characters like this. Right? You have the goody two-shoes with the morally ambiguous character, with the killer character, and it all works out fine. Again, those are experienced players. They know each other's rhythms. They know each other's playstyle. They know each other's motivations. They're used to each other. They know what each other likes to do, and they can play into each other's likes and dislikes and so on. You can't do that yet. You will someday, but you're a new player. So if you're a new player, talk to the other players. Share information with them. Tell them the basic summary of your background. Don't hide a bunch of cool stuff for the big reveal. There's no big reveal. This is a role-playing game, not a TV show. There's no audience being revealed to, and the other players don't really care about your character's secret because they're too busy playing their character, right? Their characters might care, but the players won't care. And you can easily make up a character that is going to step on the toes of the other characters. I'm not talking about powers. I'm not saying you're both controllers. I'm saying your personality, what your characters are willing to do to succeed, what compromises they're willing to make morally or not willing to make. These are all things that could cause a lot of frustration in the party if they don't fit together. So let me give you a great example. I'm thinking about, now that the barbarian idea has been nixed, I'm thinking about making up a monk. I really like monks. I like melee characters. You see this. What are we doing? We're playing a stalker, right? So I've got two ideas for a monk. Basically, a martial arts scrapper and a martial arts stalker, conceptually. Okay? The scrapper is, what is it called? Way of the open hand or something. Wow, we have two lieutenants, so we need to buff a little bit. We're probably going to need to heal here. Let's get a nice strong shot on this guy. So the martial arts scrapper, essentially, guy, is a way of the open hand monk. And my model for him is Mr. Miyagi. And Miyagi-Do karate. Karate is only for defense, never for attack. This monk will be highly ethical, highly moral, highly honorable. He will follow the sort of tenets of what we think of when we think of the honorable martial artist, right? He will not attack by surprise. He will not flank to get advantage and team up on people because it's not fair. If you knock someone down, he will wait for them to get up before he strikes again because it's not honorable to strike a downed opponent. He won't hit from behind. He won't hit with surprise. He won't help you achieve surprise, right? This character could potentially prove severely frustrating to the other players, right? I've seen the way my party operates. They try to get every mechanical advantage they possibly can, right? This monk won't do that. He would actively avoid some very strong tactical advantages because they're unfair to the enemy, and he wants to win a fair fight, not a fight where he has unfair advantages. Now, yes, he would be willing to flank a Hydra, because Hydras have 5 heads, so if even 5 of you are surrounding it, each head can fight one of you. But he's not going to flank a Goblin with you, even if it would be the best idea for winning, because he only wants to achieve what he calls true victories, which is winning in a fair fight, not false victories, which would be like smacking somebody in the back of the head while he's fighting your buddy. Okay? So, that character could be potentially a huge fly in the ointment of the party. And so what I plan to do is talk to the other players and say, look, what kind of a party do you guys want? If you want an end justifies the means, we will win at all costs. We will take every advantage we can of every possible situation to win, including attacking by surprise and beating up people while they're on the ground and knocking people unconscious from behind. This monk is not the guy for you, because he will not agree to do stuff like that. And not only won't he do it himself, he will actively intervene to stop you from doing it. If you go to a merchant and you lie to that merchant about a magic item or something, and he knows you're lying, he'll say to the merchant, don't listen to them, they're lying. He will not participate in dishonorable acts. So if you're going to want to win so badly that you're willing to act dishonorably, this is not your monk. I've got a different monk, a Way of the Shadows monk, who's more by way of like an assassin, kind of like this character. So he's like a stalker, right? That guy, right? Whereas the first monk is lawful good and very strictly, rigidly lawful good alignment. The stalker is true neutral. He will do whatever needs to be done to win. He's not going to kill gratuitously. He's not going to steal from people for his own personal gain, right? He's not a criminal. He's not chaotic, and he's not a crook, right? So he's not crooked, but he just doesn't care about honor. And so if he's got a job to do, he'll do whatever he has to do to get the job done. If he has a villain he's got to defeat, and he can like trip the guy from behind and stab him in the back and win in one shot like that, he's an assassin. He's perfectly happy to do it. He will assassinate people if they're bad guys or good guys, if he's been paid to do it. He's sort of like kind of a Clint Eastwood character from like the Fistful of Dollar type movies. And he was sort of good, but, you know, he was kind of willing to do stuff. I mean, maybe like a Tuco character, you know, not necessarily evil like Angel Eyes in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but definitely not like a goody two-shoes. And I mean, even Blondie, the good, supposedly, according to the captions in the movie, he betrayed Tuco. He did a lot of stuff just for his own gain, you know. So that's more the kind of character we're talking about. Somebody who's not as concerned about morality. And I will tell the other players, because I know they're going to say, play the character you want. Like, no, this character has the potential to cause a lot of friction, and the other character probably wouldn't. And I'm perfectly happy playing either one. They're both monks. They're both cool. I think shadow monks are awesome. I like Way of the Open Hand a little bit better, but shadow monks are very cool too, and I can easily and happily play either one, right? And so my point is, this is the do, right? Don't just say, I'm playing this Way of the Open Hand monk, and I'm going to stop the party from doing any kind of dishonorable things, but instead say, let's talk about it. Let's decide what we want to do as a group. What kind of a group are we going for, right? My best friend who's going to be running this campaign implied that there might be quite a bit of sort of like palace intrigue type stuff. Well, that would be great for the Shadow Monk and terrible for the Way of the Open Hand Monk, who's just going to have no patience for the idea of lying and intriguing and manipulating and deceiving and all the stuff you have to do when you're doing palace intrigue, right? That he's going to have no tolerance for that, and he's just going to walk up to people and tell them how, this is the truth. And that's not palace intrigue, right? That's he's a blunt instrument. And so you, instead of making this stuff up in isolation, you really should talk to your party, talk to your GM, and find out what everybody wants to do. So the first don't was don't make up a character just stat-based without talking to the GM. And the second don't is don't make up a personality, motivation, goals for your character without talking to the rest of the players, right? Make sure that your character fits the campaign of the GM, and make sure that your character also fits the tone and tenor of the party. Now, what I'm going to do here is level up, because I think then I will get another contact. We'll see what happens. So that's the second do and don't. The third do and don't, and I'm going to just check my notes here, is, so the third do and don't is don't go onto the internet searching for build guides on how to make a highly optimized build. This is a bad idea, and for multiple reasons. The first reason is that build guides are usually designed for max level. You see this in City of Heroes all the time, right? They design a character for 50th level, and here's this character will be great at 50th level. But as you're leveling it up, that doesn't help you, right? If you're a new player, you need to be able to do stuff at 4th level and at 5th level. And where do you put your enhancements while you're leveling up in order to get to 50th level in the first place? Build guides generally don't tell you that. Same thing with D&D. Oh, you're going to make an 11 paladin, 3 warlock, 2 wizard, 2 rogue, 1 barbarian, and it's awesome. Yeah, maybe it'll be awesome at 20th level. At 3rd level, you're still just going to be a paladin. And some of the choices you have to make the optimal build at 20th level might be decidedly suboptimal at 3rd level or 4th level or 5th level. The people who write these build guides are highly experienced players. They've been playing a lot. They understand the nuances of the game. They know exactly what you need to do to get to that level, and they assume you do too. But if you're a new player, you won't know what to do to get to that max level. And in the meantime, you're going to have all kinds of trouble getting this character to work as you're leveling up. The other thing I would say is many of these build guides, again, assume high-level characters. Keep in mind, if you've never played Dungeons & Dragons, and I'm sure other games are like this too, Wizards of the Coast has done studies that have shown that that the average campaign only lasts about 6 sessions and only gets the characters to 4th, 5th, or 6th level. Most players never see a double digits character. Most players never go past the 6th or 7th or 10th session. So it doesn't make sense to design a character who's only going to come into fruition on the 50th session at level 20 when you're never going to see that. By the time you've played 50 sessions, you've been in 10 different campaigns with a whole bunch of different DMs and players, and you've never gotten a character past level 6. What is the point of that build if that's what's happening to you? You're going to just be frustrated that you're designing characters that never, whose abilities never get a chance to synergize, right? Because these highly optimized builds depend on a synergy between this feat and 3 levels of that, and this spell at the second level of this, and the 5th level ability of that, and the 7th level ability of this other thing. And if you don't have all of those together, the whole thing doesn't hang together. In fact, it can be very suboptimal if you don't have all of it. And at that point, you're better off just playing a straight up class without a build guide, right? So I would say avoid that. Don't follow build guides. They are written by experts for people who are experts and understand the subtleties and the nuances of the game. As a new player, this is no insult to anyone who's a new player. As a new player, it is simply not possible that you could understand all of the subtleties and the nuances of a brand new game. Guys, I have been playing D&D 5th edition for 2.5 years, 3 years, and DMing it for 2.5 of those 3 years. I still don't understand half of the rules and subtleties and nuances of that game. Any class that no one has played, like the Warlock, the Paladin, the Druid, in my group, I know nothing about. I have only marginal understanding of wizards, and I even played one to 5th level because I only played it to 5th level, and nobody's played one in my DM'd game, right? The game I'm DMing. Even sorcerers, I only know my friend's homebrew subclass. I don't know the other subclasses. Rangers, all I know is Beastmaster because that's what my player is playing. There are so many subtle nuances to these classes that unless you've actually played the class all the way to 20th level, you're not going to know. You just can't expect yourself to be able to effectively play a class that was designed by someone who understands all of the nuances. The same thing with Champion's powers. You shouldn't expect yourself to be able to adequately play a character who was designed by me, someone who has decades of Champions experience and knows all the subtleties of those rules. So don't look at these build guides. Instead, the do is come up with a concept that works within the basic rules and ask the GM and the people at your table who have more experience to help you with that concept. That's the only build guide you should use. The build guide of your fellow players and the GM. They will help you. They will probably suggest to you a less complicated class and subclass, like, what is it, the Battlemaster Fighter is generally thought of, or is it the Champion? I can't remember. Is thought of, I think it's a Champion, is thought of as being fairly simple to play. The Scout Rogue is considered a fairly simple subclass to play. Way of the Open Palm Monk looks pretty simple to me. It's one of the reasons, guys, I'm an experienced D&D player. I've been playing D&D itself as a game from before first edition, from basic set 1982, and I've been playing 5th edition for 3 years, and I still went, I don't want to play a pure caster. They're too complicated. Not that I can't do it, but they're very complicated. And I would rather not play one. So my point here is that if even an experienced player is going to shy away, and I'm not the only one who does this, shy away from pure casters, it's no crime. It's no insult to you if someone suggests to you that maybe you should just start with a fighter or a barbarian or a monk or a rogue to begin with, and leave the pure casters to the experienced players and wait until you understand the mechanics better before you try to get into a mechanically challenging class. Don't follow build guides. Do follow the advice of your friends and your GM. And try to build a more simple character. Do the complicated stuff after you have experience. And you know what? By the time you have experience, you won't need a build guide because you'll understand the game. My fourth don't is Don't go crazy buying all of the books with all of the optional rules. Pathfinder for Savage Worlds, plus the Pathfinder Companion, plus the, what is it, the adventure guide or whatever it's called that's about to come out with all these different classes and or prestige classes, and I think new playable races and new edges and everything like that. All these optional rules. Don't go crazy with the optional rules. Stick to the basics. Right? The optional rules are great. If you have a really specific concept that maybe only needs the optional rule for it, talk to your DM about that, your GM. But if you're playing D&D, say, just use the player's handbook. It's enough, guys. Just the stuff in the player's handbook. There are tons of options, and you will have plenty of fun playing them. And you can come up with really cool concepts. I restricted myself. Oh, I got to turn off my hide. I forgot about that because this guy can't follow me. I restricted myself for all of my character ideas to Player's Handbook or Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And only one of the concepts was from Xanathar's Guide, and I allowed it to myself because I like the idea of being a swashbuckler, like a pirate. So it's one of my options that I'm thinking about besides the monks is playing an ex-pirate. And so with that character, I will allow that character to use stuff from Xanathar's Guide, but all of my other characters are fully Player's Handbook compatible. There are plenty of character ideas. I have 6, I think, character ideas. And I just don't have more because I just made myself stop. These are ambushing me, but they came from the wrong place. I made myself stop, or I could have made a dozen more character concepts. There's plenty of inspiration in the basic books. Same thing with Pathfinder for Savage Worlds. You can just Pathfinder for Savage Worlds core and just use what's in there. You don't need the Pathfinder for Savage Worlds companion, and you don't need the Adventurer's guidebook or whatever it's called, the new one that's coming out. You don't need to go look up, third-party homebrew for your character for Savage Worlds. Just play the basics. If you're playing old school 2nd edition Champions, stick to Champions. You don't need Champions 2 and Champions 3, right? Yeah, they got some cool powers in there, but you can make a lot of great characters just with Champions 2. Just with Champions. You don't need Champions 2, and you don't need Champions 3. Okay? So, whichever game you're talking about, Rollmaster, right? Rollmaster has Rollmaster and then Rollmaster Companion, Companion 2, Companion 3, Companion 4, Companion 5, and Elemental Companion. I had all those books, guys. But you don't need those books to make up a good Rollmaster character. The basic box set game for Rollmaster was enough. When you are starting out, when you are first playing the game, stick to the basics. Stick to the core. Don't go for the big, awesome options. I know they sound like fun, but they complicate the game. And you don't want to complicate the game first time out. Stick to the base books. Whatever your game, stick to the base. So don't buy all the optional books and go crazy on that. Just buy the basic books and stick to the basic books. And I am going to hate these guys until I get whatever it is. I can't remember the name of it. That's the Mez Defense. It's just like City of Heroes, right? If you're playing City of Heroes, you're playing City of Heroes for the first time, even though the class is unlocked now, you should not start out playing a Chaldean. They are a very difficult archetype to play. They are very complicated, and they were originally designed to only be playable by people who had already gotten at least one character to level 50, i.e. experts at playing City of Heroes. Okay? So you don't start with a Chaldean. Start with a scrapper. Start with a tanker. Start with a blaster. And after you learn how to play these characters and get one of them to 50, then you play a prestige archetype like a Chaldean. Same thing with D&D. Same thing with Savage Worlds. Okay? at the table. Don't buy all the optional rules. You're going to see the other players come to the table with these stacks of books, and all you have is measly little player's handbook or the measly little suede core book. And you don't have all these other optional rule supplements. That's okay. You don't need that stuff. Stick to the basics, learn the game, and once you know the game, then you will have the knowledge and experience and understanding you need to know which optional rules and supplements you like and which ones are going to capture the game mechanics that you want for you. But you can't know that ahead of time, so you definitely want to stick to the basics when you first start. The last don't I have for new players is don't buy the GM supplements. Unless you're going to GM, if you're just going to play, do not buy the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Monster Manual, etc. Do not buy in Deadlands the Weird West. Do not buy the Weird West Companion. That's mostly for GMs. Don't buy the Blood Drive campaign. That's exclusively for GMs, right? Don't buy the Pathfinder Adventure Paths. Don't buy Mordenkainen's Guide to the Monsters of the Multiverse. But Scrapper, they have playable races in it. Yeah, but they also have all of the monsters and the secrets. And it's spoilers. And what I will say to you as a player, instead, just buy the player book and only use that. Right? Like Rifts for Savage Worlds. There's a player's book, I think, and a GM book. Just buy the player's book. And I wish they did that for all the other Savage Worlds books. Why? Because, guys, let me tell you, there is only one chance you will ever have to play a game, a role-playing game, for the first time. You're only ever going to play D&D for the first time, one time. That campaign, that first campaign, is the only time that you're going to play D&D for the first time. Enjoy it. It's the only chance you get to be surprised, right? Like my player, who's new to D&D, when she walked right into a gelatinous cube and almost got engulfed by it and had no idea what she was fighting. All the other players were giggling and chortling, and they knew what it was, right? And they were like, oh, cool. But they knew exactly what they were and how to avoid one and how to deal with it. She had no idea, okay? She had a blast because she didn't know how to deal with it, and she got to discover that. Same player walked into a treasure room and got bitten by a mimic, which is a monster that can make itself look like furniture, such as a chest, and that's the most typical way, right? And she got bitten, and one of the other players said, oh, mimics, right? And she had no idea what the heck was going on. She loved it because it was new to her, and it was exciting because it was new to her. So give yourself that chance to be surprised, to enjoy fighting goblins for the first time and have no idea what goblins do, to enjoy fighting a mind flayer for the first time and not even knowing what one is called, right? To be surprised by the abilities of Slot Eye or the fact that a troll has certain things that it can do, which I won't describe because I don't want to ruin it. All of these creatures have these sort of trademark special abilities. They're infamous or famous in D&D, and everybody who's faced them in any edition of D&D has maybe not an understanding of, in 5th edition, the exact mechanics, but a general idea that this particular creature regenerates or that particular creature regrows a head if you chop it off, right? So this new player faced for the first time ever in her life Hydra, Slot Eye, goblins. What else did I say? A gelatinous cube, mimics, lizard folk, troglodytes with their stench. And that sort of stuff, you only get to be surprised by it and enjoy the novelty of it one time in your life. Once you've fought Slot Eye, they're just another slot. Right? It's just another slot. Once you've fought trolls, this is just another troll. So give yourself the opportunity to enjoy spoiler-free play. Don't buy all of those setting books and all of those monster books and the DM's guide and read through all the magic items and everything. Enjoy not knowing how a staff of power works and finding it out as you play. Give yourself that opportunity instead of robbing yourself by buying the book and then reading through it and spoilerizing. So those are my don'ts and do's, right? My don'ts are don't make up a character mechanically in isolation without talking to the GM. Talk to the GM first. Don't decide on the motivation, personality, background of your character in isolation without talking to the other players. Talk to the other players first. Don't use build guides to uber optimize your character. We're going to go defeat the recruiter. Don't use build guides to hyper optimize your character. Instead, build a simple, easy to run character so that you can learn the basic mechanics of the game first. Right? Don't go crazy buying books with optional rules. Stick to the basics. And don't buy all of the supplements for GMs and spoilerize the game for yourself. Give yourself the opportunity to be surprised. You will enjoy it. You will have fun. And this is my advice to new players. Right? Talk to the GM. Talk to the other players. Stick to the basics. And try to concentrate on having fun in the game system. Now, some people will say, but Scrapper, the way I have fun is by uber optimizing my character. Okay. If you really have to do that, don't listen to me. Go ahead and do it. But I submit to you that you will be happier with your uber optimization after you understand the mechanics and have played the game for a while, rather than just listening to what some optimizer on the internet is doing for clickbait, right? Because remember, this stuff, it's not really necessarily good builds. It might be, but it's mostly there to be clickbait. And that means that the person who wrote it has no vested interest in giving you an actual good build. He just has a vested interest in giving you a build that looks good enough that you'll click on it. Meanwhile, your GM and your fellow players do have your interests at heart. So if you listen to them and you try to stick to the basics, you will probably have a lot more fun playing a game like D&D or Savage Worlds or Champions than you would if you were slavishly obeying a build guide. So guys, that's my rant for today. Hopefully you found this helpful. I know lots of new players get sort of trapped in this idea of, I've got to optimize, right? I mean, I've seen it even in City of Heroes. New players would come onto our guild when the guild leader was still active and was into builds and stuff. Brand new players who never played City of Heroes would start playing the game. They would join the guild, and they would immediately ask her for some sort of a hyper-optimized Uber build. And what she would give them is the build as it would be at level 50 after you have 500 million influence and you have spent, I don't know how many hours playing the game. But that doesn't help you get started. And what you really need is to get started. And once you've played the game enough, you won't need her help to figure out how to make your character build, because you'll understand the game enough that you could do the build you want instead of the build somebody else thinks would be fun to play. Because that's the other thing. This is what the optimizer thinks is fun to play, rather than what you think is fun to play. Try to get instead with what you think is fun to play. Right? There are tons of optimized builds. Not all of them are going to be fun for everybody, right? Somebody who, like me, who loves scrappers, I don't care how optimized you make a blaster, I won't enjoy it because I like scrappers. Okay? But I only know that because I've played the game so many times that I know the style of play that I like. So get familiar with the game. Get familiar with the campaign. Get familiar with your friends and the table. And don't worry about listening to what the optimizers tell you to do. Until next time, guys, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been Let's Rant with Scrapperlock on City of Heroes.